AAA games may have massive budgets and giant studios behind them, but some of the most memorable experiences come from smaller teams with real passion and creativity. Even without huge marketing campaigns, these AA games are built with such strong ideas and vision that more and more players are starting to prefer them over big-budget titles. In this video, we're going to talk about 25 amazing AA games, so let's get started.
Beautiful day on Citadel Station.
Humanity is
on the verge.
System Shock Remake. When the System Shock Remake launched in 2023, Night Dive Studios basically showed the entire industry how a remake should actually be done. They kept everything that made the original special: the atmosphere, the level design, the feeling of total freedom, while rebuilding the visuals from the ground up without losing the soul of the game. Inside Citadel Station, Sodan is constantly hunting you, and surviving means paying attention to absolutely everything around you. The game barely holds your hand. You wake up, explore, and slowly figure things out on your own, which honestly makes the experience feel way more immersive. Even today, very few immersive sims reach the level this game does.
What could be the strangest place for a heist? The abandoned and restricted Chernobyl.
Chernobylite might be one of the best games if you want a mix of survival RPG mechanics and an emotional sci-fi mystery story. You play as Igor, a physicist searching for his lost lover Tatiana inside the Chernobyl exclusion zone. And the deeper you go, the stranger things become. But honestly, the strongest part of this game is its atmosphere. The developers recreated parts of Chernobyl using real-world scans, and combined with the lighting and sound design, the world feels disturbingly real. On top of that, you also manage your base, gather resources, and build relationships with survivors, which makes the experience feel much more personal. And because your choices actually matter, your first playthrough can go very differently depending on what you decide to do. Warhammer 40,000, Space Marine 2. Space Marine 2 finally delivers something Warhammer fans have wanted for years, a game where being a Space Marine actually feels terrifyingly powerful. You're tearing through endless Tyrannid swarms with brutal weapons and over-the-top abilities, and the combat feels so satisfying that you might accidentally play for 5 hours straight without noticing. The massive battles, the constant chaos, and coordinating destruction with your teammates make every mission feel cinematic. The campaign works both solo and in 3-player co-op, and the operations mode gives the game serious replay value. Sure, visually it may not be the most advanced AAA game ever made, but once the atmosphere kicks in, you honestly stop caring about that completely. Frostpunk 2. We've talked about Frostpunk so many times before, but it absolutely deserves to be in this video because very few games manage to do what Frostpunk does. The first game was already incredible, but the sequel expands the scale dramatically. You're no longer managing a single city. Now you're trying to control an entire frozen civilization struggling to survive. Political factions, resource wars, collapsing morality. The game constantly pressures you into making impossible decisions, and that's the genius of it. There are no perfect answers here. Every choice feels uncomfortable, and the game wants you to feel that pressure. Honestly, when it comes to emotional weight in strategy games, Frostpunk 2 might be one of the best examples the genre has ever seen.
There has been an increase in bandit activity outside the village walls.
Atomfall. Atomfall combines the English countryside with a post-apocalyptic setting in a way that immediately feels unique. Inspired by the real-life Windscale nuclear disaster, the game mixes historical elements with strange speculative fiction. You enter a quarantine zone to investigate what happened there, but the deeper you go, the less you trust anyone around you. Every conversation feels suspicious, and every character seems like they're hiding something. The gameplay focuses heavily on exploration and investigation, but when combat happens, it's surprisingly satisfying. And visually, there really aren't many games that portray rural England in such a weirdly beautiful post-apocalyptic style. Not many people are talking about this game yet, but honestly, I think it'll slowly build a strong fan base over time.
The time has come for those whoresons to pay for what they did to us.
Kingdom Come: Deliverance. Before Kingdom Come: Deliverance, almost nobody made a truly realistic historical RPG without fantasy elements, and honestly, that's exactly why this game stands out so much. You start as an ordinary villager in 15th century Bohemia, and at first, you'll probably struggle with almost everything. Sword fighting, archery, riding a horse. You actually have to learn these skills over time just like a real person would. The NPCs all follow their own routines, your decisions have real consequences, and the world reacts to the way you behave. It doesn't feel like a typical RPG world world designed around the player. It feels like a world that exists on its own. I'm actually replaying it right now, and honestly, this might still be one of the greatest RPGs ever made.
Where are we going?
Come on, just run as fast as you can!
A Plague Tale: Innocence. If you want to experience one of the best Plague-era atmospheres ever created in gaming, A Plague Tale: Innocence absolutely deserves your attention. When Asobo Studio released this game in 2019, a lot of people were surprised by just how emotional and cinematic the story turned out to be. As Amicia and her younger brother Hugo travel across medieval France, the game mixes stealth gameplay with an incredibly strong sibling relationship story. The rat swarms aren't just enemies, they're basically part of the puzzle design itself. Using light and objects to manipulate the rats creates some genuinely tense moments, and visually the entire game feels like playing through a dark medieval movie. Seriously, don't let this one slip under your radar. The Surge 2. The Surge 2 is honestly one of the most underrated Souls-like games out there, especially if you love cyberpunk aesthetics. What makes it unique is the limb targeting system. Instead of just attacking enemies normally, you deliberately aim for specific body parts, arms, legs, heads, and cutting them off rewards you with new equipment. At first, the system feels strange, but once it clicks, the combat becomes incredibly strategic and satisfying. Jericho City also does a great job balancing visual style with danger. The world feels hostile, consistent, and genuinely interesting to explore. The learning curve is tough but fair. It got overshadowed by bigger Souls games, but honestly, The Surge 2 has its own identity. And if you want a brutal combat system mixed with cyberpunk atmosphere, this game might surprise you way more than you expect.
Of all my children. Out of a world of ruins, they have built a new Jerusalem.
The Talos Principle 2 is one of those rare games that mixes mind-bending puzzles with deep philosophical questions, and somehow makes both work perfectly together. The game constantly explores ideas like consciousness, existence, and the meaning of life through its dialogue and world design, while the puzzles themselves keep getting smarter and more creative the further you progress. Laser redirection, gravity mechanics, and environmental systems slowly become more complex, but the logic always stays consistent and satisfying. Visually, the game looks incredible too. Every biome feels unique, and moving between them makes the world feel even more immersive. With this game, Crow Team proved that you don't need a massive budget to create something truly memorable. Kena: Bridge of Spirits is one of the few games that perfectly blends animated movie aesthetics with actual gameplay. Considering this was Ember Lab's first game, the result is honestly impressive both visually and emotionally. Behind the adorable little forest spirits hides a surprisingly challenging combat system. As your road companions grow stronger, they become important tools both in combat and while interacting with the environment. The boss fights can be difficult at first, but once the gameplay clicks, everything starts flowing naturally. The world design feels like you're playing through a high-quality animated film, and games like this always remind me that smaller studios are still capable of making incredible experiences. Sifu delivers martial arts combat better than almost any other game out there. One of its most unique mechanics is aging. Every time you die, your character gets older. That alone makes every fight feel more intense, because you constantly try to survive without aging too quickly, while still becoming more experienced over time. Landing perfect parries, mastering combos, and keeping control during chaotic fights feels incredibly satisfying. The first few hours can be brutal, but once the combat system finally clicks, the game becomes insanely rewarding. Even though it's a relatively short experience, I genuinely think every gamer should try Sifu at least once.
It's still in England, isn't it?
Vampyr didn't receive universal praise when it first released, but I still think people overlook the things this game does really well. Set in plague-ridden London during 1918, you play as a vampire doctor trying to save people while also needing blood to survive. The game's morality system is where things get really interesting. The more you learn about an NPC, the more powerful you become if you decide to feed on them. But killing them affects the entire district and can throw the city into chaos. That moral conflict is the heart of the experience. The combat may feel a little rough at times, but the atmosphere, music, and storytelling make it very easy to ignore its flaws.
A commander, a prophet.
Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous. If you love RPGs, you've probably already played Pathfinder: Wrath of the Righteous, but if you haven't, you should seriously give it a chance. The game offers 23 different classes and countless subclass combinations, turning character builds into a game of their own. Then the mythic power system pushes everything to another level entirely. Managing armies while also fighting deep turn-based tactical battles can feel overwhelming at first, but that complexity is exactly what makes the game stand out. If you enjoyed games like Baldur's Gate 3, there's a very high chance you'll love this too.
You are a detective in the city of Revachol.
Disco Elysium isn't just a game, it honestly feels like a masterpiece. Created something incredibly bold here, a fully dialogue-driven RPG with almost no traditional combat at all. You play as a broken detective suffering from memory loss, trying to rebuild himself while investigating one of the strangest cities ever created in gaming. The writing quality is on another level. Politics, grief, identity, failure. Very few games explore these themes this honestly. The world feels disturbingly real, and the conversations stay in your head long after you stop playing.
All right, let me just get this out of the way.
Soma takes questions about consciousness and identity and turns them into one of the most unforgettable horror experiences ever made. You wake up as Simon inside the underwater facility Pathos II without really understanding how much time has passed, and from that moment, the game slowly pulls you into something deeply disturbing. Instead of relying on cheap jump scares, Soma overwhelms you with existential fear. The monsters are dangerous, sure, but the real horror comes from the questions the game asks you. If you truly understand what the story is trying to say, the ending hits unbelievably hard. The gameplay feels familiar if you've played Amnesia: The Dark Descent, but Soma goes far beyond that. It's not just a game, it's an experience. And honestly, this is one of those games you should finish in a single sitting. Chivalry II is one of the few games that makes medieval warfare feel both completely ridiculous and insanely satisfying at the same time. Watching massive battles with dozens of players swinging swords everywhere is already entertaining enough, but what really makes the game special is how the melee combat system somehow makes all that chaos feel controlled. It takes time to learn, but once the combat finally clicks, every duel starts feeling cinematic. Different classes, huge maps, and multiple game modes keep the experience fresh for a very long time. You should definitely go into this knowing it's a multiplayer-focused game, but if you play it with friends, you honestly won't need anything else for hours. It's cheap, addictive, and way more fun than it looks. Asterigos: Curse of the Stars proves that an action RPG doesn't need a massive budget to deliver a genuinely fun experience. Inspired by Greek and Roman mythology, the game combines melee combat and magic in a really smooth and satisfying way. The 6 different weapon types all create unique playstyles, and switching between them during combat feels surprisingly fluid. The world design is colorful, varied, and consistently interesting to explore. Boss fights can be challenging and require patience, but they never feel unfair. Sure, the story falls into cliches sometimes. That part is true, but the gameplay loop and visual identity easily make up for it. For an OA-sized RPG, this game offers way more than most people expect. Honestly, it feels like a hidden gem that deserves a lot more attention. Stray isn't just a game where you play as a cat. The entire design philosophy is built around that idea. In Blue 12 Studios' world, jumping across rooftops, squeezing through tiny spaces, and wandering through the remains of humanity feels genuinely unique. There's barely any combat. Dialogue is minimal too, but the atmosphere and environmental storytelling completely carry the experience. The emotional connection you build with the robot community ends up being way stronger than most people expect. It's a short game, but that's actually one of its strengths, because every chapter feels purposeful. There's a reason Stray became one of the most talked about indie games of 2022. Once you start it, it's really hard to stop playing. Everspace 2 is one of the rare games that blends space combat and RPG progression this smoothly. With this game, Rockfish Games moved away from the roguelike structure of the first game and focused on creating a full story-driven space adventure. And honestly, it was the right decision. Every ship type, weapon class, and skill tree changes the gameplay in meaningful ways, so experimenting with builds never gets boring. The space environments are absolutely beautiful too. Hades. Hades is honestly one of the smartest roguelikes ever made. Supergiant Games somehow turned every death into progression and every failed run into something meaningful. But what really makes Hades special is the gameplay loop. Every weapon completely changes the way you play. The Stygian blade feels aggressive and fast. The shield lets you play more defensively, while weapons like the Twin Fists turn the game into pure chaos. Then you combine those weapons with different god abilities, and suddenly every run feels unique. The combat is insanely smooth, responsive, and addictive. Dashing through enemies, chaining abilities together, and creating overpowered builds never gets old. And while the gameplay alone could carry the entire experience, the story and characters somehow make it even harder to stop playing. Evil West. Evil West basically asks one question: what if the Wild West had vampires? And somehow the answer turned into one of the most fun action games in recent years. The game doesn't try to overwhelm you with complicated mechanics. Instead, it focuses on making combat feel as satisfying as possible. You're constantly switching between brutal melee attacks, shotguns, revolvers, electric gauntlets, and the flow between all of them feels incredibly smooth. Enemies aggressively push toward you, so fights constantly feel intense and chaotic. Boss fights are creative, loud, and genuinely fun to learn. The story isn't anything groundbreaking, but honestly, that's not why you play Evil West. You play it because punching a vampire across the room with electric-powered fists never stops being entertaining.
We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death.
Automata is one of those games that completely changes once you realize the first playthrough is only the beginning. Mixed, fast-paced action combat with RPG systems, bullet hell mechanics, and even visual novel-style storytelling, and somehow all of it works together perfectly. Gameplay constantly changes to keep things fresh. One moment you're slicing through machines with stylish combos, the next you're flying through shoot-'em-up sections or hacking enemy systems as NieR. The combat feels smooth, fast, and incredibly satisfying, especially once you start mastering dodges and weapon combinations. But what really stays with you is the story. The more endings you reach, the more the world starts revealing itself. 2B, NieR, and A2 end up leaving a bigger emotional impact than most AAA games ever managed to.
Let's rock! This is awesome!
Hi-Fi Rush was probably the biggest surprise of 2023. Nobody expected Tango Gameworks to make a rhythm-based action game this good, but somehow they absolutely nailed it. Everything in the game moves to the beat: the environment, enemy attacks, platforming, and especially the combat. The cool part is that the game doesn't force you to perfectly follow the rhythm, but when you finally sync your attacks with the music, combat suddenly feels incredible. Combos flow smoother, attacks hit harder, and every fight starts feeling like a playable music video. Chai's personality and the chemistry between the team make the story surprisingly charming too. The visuals are colorful, energetic, and full of style. This is the kind of game you randomly start at midnight and suddenly realize the sun is coming up. Remnant 2. Remnant 2 proves that Souls-like gameplay and guns actually work together way better than most people expected. The gunplay is the first thing you notice. Every weapon feels powerful and distinct, and constantly switching between ranged combat and close-range panic situations keeps fights intense the entire time. The archetype system also gives players a lot of freedom. You can build around healing, heavy damage, support abilities, or pure survivability, and co-op teams become way more interesting because of it. But the real standout feature is the procedural world generation. Two players can literally experience different bosses, maps, events, and loot in the same game. That unpredictability keeps exploration exciting for dozens of hours. And honestly, when you play this with friends, it becomes almost impossible to put down.
You either join us, or you run.
Ghostrunner 2. Ghostrunner 2 is pure speed, reflex, and precision. The entire game feels like a mix between a parkour simulator and a cyberpunk samurai fantasy. You're constantly wall running, grappling through levels, dodging bullets, and killing enemies in a single hit, while knowing they can kill you just as fast. What makes the gameplay so satisfying is how quickly you restart after dying. Instead of getting frustrated, you immediately want to try again, because every level starts feeling like a puzzle you slowly master through movement and timing. The motorcycle sections and larger hub areas add more variety compared to the first game, but the movement system is still the real star here. Once the controls finally click in your brain, the game gives you a feeling that almost nothing else can replicate.